Disclaimer: the information recorded in this episode is correct as of the time of recording, but please keep in mind that details are subject to change. This is the Italian Real Estate Podcast, here to help you with the ins and outs and basics of Italian real estate, presented by ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Italian Real Estate Podcast, presented by ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com. Of course, we are back at it again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I am doing great, thank you. And of course, I'm Rafael Di Furia, and in this episode, we wanted to talk a bit about the retirement visa that is available not only for Italy, but also for Portugal. We understand that there are a number of people who are interested in both countries and are interested in comparing and contrasting what might be available to them. But Marco, before getting into the Portuguese section of this episode, would you mind giving us a quick rundown of the Italian retirement visa?
The Italian retirement visa, otherwise known as the elective residency visa, was introduced in 2011 to allow foreigners with stable passive income to relocate to Italy without having the ability to carry out any work activity in Italy or to seek any employment. The main requirement is to have, like I just mentioned, stable passive income equal to at least 31,000 euros per year. So when you apply for the elective residency visa, you will need to provide financial statements or letters from banks or financial institutions that show that your passive income is at least equal to 31,000 euros per year, meaning that you're able to support yourself without having to rely on any type of work activity while in Italy. Now, the 31,000 euros per year will also apply to spouses. So if you're coming with family members, such as spouses, you will have to show that either your spouse has also passive income equal to at least 31,000 euros per year, or that you're able to cover your spouses, or that you're able to support your spouse's stay in Italy by showing that you have enough passive income to cover the both of you. Now, passive income means income coming from pensions, investments, social security. So something that does not come from work activities. Other requirements are the following. You will need to present a motivational letter indicating why you want to obtain the elective residency visa. You will also have to provide proof of lodging in Italy, meaning a valid rental agreement or documentation that shows that you own a property in Italy. Now, a question that we get a lot is, how can I enter into a rental agreement without having a visa? Now, that is possible. However, to avoid that you enter into an agreement and then your visa is not approved, we always advise to negotiate with the landlord a provision, a clause in the contract that states that if you don't get the visa, you're not responsible for paying the rent for the entire duration of the contract, but just for the first few months. And that avoids, when you sign long-term rental agreements, which is what is required for the retirement visa, that you're liable for the rent, for the entire duration of the contract. Some consulates will also require that you present criminal background checks. However, that depends on the consulate. Not all of the consulates, especially in the US, require criminal background checks for you to obtain the retirement visa. The application is submitted through the Italian consulate in the area where you reside. Every Italian consulate in the US has a specific jurisdiction, so you will have to submit the application through the consulate where you reside, and the application is generally processed in 90 days. During those 90 days, the consulate will retain your passport, and you will receive back your passport once your visa has been approved or denied. And once your visa has been released, then you have 90 days to relocate to Italy to apply for a residency permit, which needs to be obtained within the first 8 days. So make sure that you apply for the residency permit within 8 days from your arrival in Italy.
Very interesting, Marco, and thank you so much for going into so much detail about this visa/residency permit. And just out of curiosity, how long is the validity of this residency permit once the individual actually ends up getting it?
The residency permit is valid for 1 year, and it can be renewed from within Italy as long as you continue to meet the requirements, especially the financial requirements.
And then also another factor that I know many people will be very curious about is if this is a path to citizenship. If you get this residency permit, this retirement permit to live in Italy, will they be able to eventually become a citizen of Italy?
Yes, the retirement visa allows you to qualify for the Italian citizenship through residency after you have spent a number of years in Italy, and more precisely 10 years, unless you have Italian ancestors up to the second degree, in which case you can apply for Italian citizenship through residency after only 3 years of residency in the country. But also something to keep in mind is that permanent residency at some point becomes an option after the first 5 years. In fact, you can apply for permanent residency, which allows you basically to obtain a different kind of residency permit, which is no longer connected to those initial requirements that allowed you to obtain the retirement visa.
Thank you so much, Marco. And now that we know a little bit more about the Italian elective residency visa and permit, maybe I think it might be worthwhile to compare and contrast where it differs with the Portuguese equivalent. So, Marco, could you tell us a little bit of some of the differences? I know, for example, one of the differences, namely, is the ability to work during your time in the country.
Exactly. The Portuguese retirement visa, also known as the D7 visa, doesn't allow the applicant to officially work in Portugal in the first few months, and more specifically until the residency permit is officially obtained. So in other words, while you live in Portugal on the visa, you can't work. But once you obtain the residency permit, which in theory should take up to 4 months after you relocate to Portugal, but that can vary depending on the workload of the Portuguese authorities that need to release the residency permit. But once you obtain the residency permit, then you can officially work in Portugal, as opposed to the Italian retirement visa that doesn't allow the person who lives in Italy on a visa to officially work in Portugal. Instead, as long as your financial requirements continue to be above the threshold, once you obtain the residency permit, you can perform work activities.
So, Marco, speaking of this threshold, what is the exact figure that we're talking about here that a person would have to meet?
The current threshold in Portugal is 9,840 euros per year. Now, that number was just updated in 2024 and is probably going to go up in the next years. But as of right now, it is 9,840. Now, if you consider that the threshold in Italy to qualify for the retirement visa is 31,000 euros per year, that's a big difference. So in Italy, you need to show that your passive income is at least equal to 31,000 euros per year. On the other hand, in Portugal, your passive income needs to be at least 9,840 euros per year to qualify for the retirement visa.
And another difference, Marco, with the timeline of how things work in Portugal versus how they work in Italy. Could you give us a little rundown of the timeline of what somebody could expect if they were to go through the process in Portugal?
Once you have obtained the Portuguese retirement visa, you're allowed to enter Portugal twice before you obtain your residency permit. The application for your residency permit needs to be done through IMA, a local governmental office in Portugal. You will need to schedule an appointment with them and submit documents that show that you meet the financial requirements, proof of accommodation in Portugal, and they are the ones that will approve or deny your residency permit. The residency permit is given for 2 years. And in order to maintain the residency permit, you need to live in Portugal for at least 16 months over the course of those 2 years. So if you live in Portugal for less than 8 months per year or 16 months in a 2 years time window, then you will not be able to continue to have your Portuguese retirement visa. Now, with regard to Italy, the situation is a little bit different because the elective residency permit in Italy has normally a validity of 1 year. And after 1 year, you can renew it from within Italy, and you will lose the ability to renew your residency permit in Italy if you don't live in Italy for at least 6 months and 1 day. So again, there is some slight differences between the two countries regarding the validity of the visa or residency permit and how long you need to live in the country in order not to lose your status.
Thanks, Marco, for explaining that timeline. And what about language requirements? What do those look like in each country? I mean, of course, for the initial visa and residency permits, there's no actual requirement, but comparing and contrasting between the two, what would it look like in Portugal in comparison with Italy if a person were to want to get citizenship?
Regarding the Portuguese retirement permit, after 2 years of living in Portugal, of course, you have the ability to renew your permit. And after 5 years, you have the ability to either apply for permanent residency in Portugal or to apply for Portuguese citizenship. Now, in both cases, you need to obtain a language certificate that shows that your level is at least A2. Now, with regard to Italy, after 5 years of residing in the country, meaning you have renewed your elective residency permit for 5 years, then you are able to apply for the permanent residency permit, which does require that you pass a language test, and the level required is A2. On the other hand, if you want to apply for Italian citizenship by residency, you need to wait 10 years, and the level required in terms of language is B1, so a little bit higher, unless you are of Italian descent, in which case, if you have an Italian-born parent or grandparent, you can apply for citizenship after only 3 years of legal residency in Italy, and the language test is still required, and the level is B1.
Well, Marco, this has been a fascinating episode, comparing and contrasting the retirement options both in Italy and Portugal. But of course, if somebody is interested in retiring to Italy, how can they get in contact with you and your team? But then also, I'm going to add another question on top. If somebody is indeed interested in retiring to Portugal, is that a service that you can offer?
Yes, of course. And if anybody's interested, they can contact us through our website, italianrealestatelawyers.com, or give us a call. Our number is on the website.
Well, absolutely fantastic. And of course, if you're interested in more content about moving to Italy, purchasing property in Italy, or making Italy your home, be sure that you're subscribed to this YouTube channel as well as the audio-only podcast. But of course, if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, that means you're also automatically subscribed to the Italian Citizenship podcast, a project that Marco and I collaborate on, where we talk about some of the practical aspects of legally making Italy your home. And also, if you're interested in more information about life in Italy and Portugal, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia, or you can search on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform of choice for Not Your Average Globetrotter, where I take you around Italy and Portugal and talk about life in each of these countries. But of course, again, we have been here with Italian attorney Marco Permunian from ItalianRealEstatelawyers.com. I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we'll see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.